Welcome to Ask a Fund Manager, and in this video we are going to do part 2 on my series on reserve currencies. And is the US dollar on the verge of collapse and going to lose its status as reserve currency? I talked about more my economic and trading views, or macro view really, because I don't really recommend specific trades on this show, but on the dollar. But for the question that led to a part 2 is what would cause my mind to change on the dollar being able to maintain its reserve currency status? Because the main flaw is there's a lack of better alternatives, and the U.S. is still a very relatively trustworthy country. If you want to see part 1 where I go in more to 6 of the dollar, just be right here. Click on the link. Otherwise, we'll move on. And I think really the only catalyst that can cause the dollar to lose its reserve currency status is a rapid political shift that erodes the credibility of the United States of America. This could take the shape in a lot of forms. I mean, historically, the way that a country loses its reserve currency status has been by losing a war. This is how the French lost their reserve currency status, by losing the 7 Years' War and the Napoleonic Wars. This is how Spain lost its reserve currency status, through losing the War of Spanish Succession. And you can go back in a lot of history. Just usually when a country loses a war, their bond market and their currency market collapses. Given the relative strength of the U.S. military versus other countries in the world, and the lack of catalyst for a foreign war for a variety of reasons, especially the advent of nuclear weapons, I don't see that really as the case. Britain was a little different. They were technically on the winning side of World War II, but they expended so much resources to fight World War I and World War II. It was a Pyrrhic victory that cost them their empire and their international financial credibility to the U.S., because they were the U.S. they borrowed the money from to finance these wars. And so even though the British were technically on the winning side, the British pound lost its reserve currency status because Britain went broke. And it went broke for a number of reasons of the wars, and also shortly after World War II, they elected Clement Attlee, who shifted the priorities of fiscal spending from maintaining the empire to more generous social programs domestically, which were quite expensive. I'm not going to really go into the merits of that, but what it did is that it reduced Britain's sway abroad and power and its relevance in the global financial system, and as a result, the dollar effectively replaced them as the reserve currency. So I think it would be something similar in the United States. We would have to have either an American version of a Clement Attlee, or probably more to extreme, or some other political shift where basically the American public does not really care about preserving the reserve currency status. They don't really care about global trade or financial transactions abroad, and maintaining the role of the dollar in trade, and or just keeping purchasing power high enough to have a trustworthy credit market. Because if I'm a foreigner and I'm going to buy U.S. Treasuries and borrow, why would I do that if I think the currency is going to fall at a rate much faster than what I'm being paid in interest? It doesn't make sense, even if it's just a cash synthetic, to store money in a currency that you know is going to consistently lose value due to massive deficit spending. It would even, I mean, the only reason why U.S. hasn't lost its reserve currency status already is because most of the world is doing similar type fiscal and monetary policies, and nobody's willing to step up the bar and back their currency with a hard asset, because it takes two to tango here. So, the U.S. can run a bad fiscal policy, but if nobody calls them out on it, then it's just going to be all as normal. like example, this is in the 70s and the 60s where the U.S. was running deficits in the Vietnam War, but the the Bretton Woods system held until countries such as France started demanding taking their gold back, and then that's when Nixon was forced to close the gold window and ended the Bretton Woods system. We don't have that country or organization or vigilante in the capital market yet saying calling the bluff on deficit spending. And what would it take to do that is really the ultimate question, is what the point is it going to break. I think there's three possibilities. One, a large enough of a country decides to back their currency in a hard asset such as gold, silver, or even oil, but I think given just the fact that we're switching more to natural gas and electric alternatives to a lot of the uses of petroleum, that's not going to be the most likely one. So yeah, switch to a hard asset to back a currency. If you did that, like say China decided to back all the RMBs in gold, it'd probably become the reserve currency overnight. But does China have enough gold to do that? And I don't think so. Their current reserve levels, they're trying to hoard as much gold as they can, but they're not there yet. And even if they did have it, would they do that to risk compromising their competitiveness in terms of international trade and exports? I doubt it. So that's one catalyst, is somebody decides to back it. The other one would be is that just if other countries, even if they don't go back to a gold standard, is that they unilaterally, the rest of the world, starts to tighten monetary policy and the U.S. remains disproportionately easy. This is a more likely scenario. Way you could see this is, say, if now that if Trump wins re-election, or if the Democrats come in and Trump decides, like, look, I don't have to run for election again. Why do I care about deficits? Or why don't I just start paying people $5,000 a month in basic income? Deficits be darned. That, I think, would be something that extreme, probably would trigger like a switch to a different reserve currency. Or on the other side, if the Democrats won and they completely did all the largesse of the Green New Deal, and we don't care, we'll have the Fed print and pay for it directly, MMT style, I think that would be also enough to erode the credibility, assuming other countries in the world didn't follow the United States. And I think there would be a good chance Europe would follow the United States in that scenario. So I don't think the euro would replace it. China, their problem is their capital markets aren't open enough. They have too many restrictions. So the question really is that if the country runs itself to the ground with a banana republic fiscal policy, the United States, and nobody steps up to replace it, what would be the next reserve currency? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, some people say cryptocurrencies, but they're very volatile and not the most secure asset. You've got gold, which you can, I guess, digitally now kind of do things such as gold money, but I'm not sure if there's Triffin's dilemma. There might not be enough gold in circulation to run a viable reserve currency. And so, I mean, I think what you would do is either have some sort of private currency, maybe a more secure cryptocurrency that's not out yet, that is backed by something like real estate maybe in a particular country, or gold or some other hard asset, or maybe people do trust Bitcoin enough that it becomes the new reserve currency and the volatility comes down enough that it's an effective store of value. I'm really, that's the thing that makes this difficult of betting on a reserve currency alternative, is which currency would it be? Like, there really isn't anybody to step up on the plate. I see the catalyst is political dysfunction and fiscal policy to the extreme that creates enough inflation that people want out, or the U.S. having a foreign policy defeat. The thing is that where will they go next? I mean, it's most likely either a private currency that is backed by some hard asset, as I mentioned before, a private cryptocurrency maybe that's more of a stable coin in nature, or the Chinese open up their capital markets and use the RMB. Those are the three possibilities, and that's kind of my take on is what it would take to break it. Just mainly just a political failure in the United States that completely erodes international credibility. We have not hit that yet. I think there's a lot of room to go before we do hit that. In terms of reserve currency time frame, reserve currencies last an average of like 100 years, so even based on historical precedents, there's probably at least another 20 years left of the dollar as the reserve currency. If you like this video and you want to watch some other ones, so like and subscribe our channel. We're going to do one every week. If you have a question you'd like to ask me, write it in the comments, or you can email me at askafundmanager@gmail.com. And thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day.